Welcome to the EarthWorks podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Kevin Hicks with EarthWorks, and it's been a few weeks since I've done a podcast, but I'm excited to have my friend Gwen Stahnke, PhD, from many, many places. We're going to get into that here in a minute, but she's definitely one of the original women in turf. And Gwen, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. I've got a good list of questions for us today to kind of wander through, and the chances of us finishing on task are slim to none. So
that's good.
Yeah, I like to let it wind through. But first of all, you're very well known in the Western U.S. because that's where you spent most of your career.
Mm-hmm.
So those not from the West, tell us a little bit about yourself. I'll tell you a little bit about yourself, and then you could fill in any of the blanks. You're the emeritus professor of Turfgrass at WSU, Puyallup.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And we'll kind of get into that here in a minute. And then it looks like you've also, I don't know if you've maintained this for a while or if this is new since you officially retired, Stahnke Environmental Turfgrass, LLC. Is that new?
That actually happened while I was still working at Walla Walla because I was doing some research on the side.
Okay, yeah. Got it. And you got so run through your accreditation. Did you get your PhD from Texas A&M?
No, I got my master's at Texas A&M. So if we back up, I got my bachelor's with Al Turgeon at University of Illinois.
Okay.
And my master's at Texas A&M with Dr. Beard, and my PhD with Bob Sherman at University of Nebraska.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Pretty big pillars in the industry.
Yeah, it's funny how that it's all a related family, because I worked for Al for a while, but I'll stop because I'll get off track if I start going through that.
Hey, I'm all about off track. That's fine because I studied under him as well at Penn State. So there's he's definitely one of those guys that impacted a lot of people in the turf.
Well, and now I've moved closer to him since he's retired in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm in Lebanon, Tennessee. So and I saw him about a year ago. So we still keep in touch.
So you worked for him in research?
I worked for him at TruGreen. Actually, he was my first. I did do research projects with him at University of Illinois because Al, was my major professor there. And then Kirk Hurdo, who was with ChemLawn, was doing all his stuff in the lab. So I used to watch his radioactive glassware. That's probably why I didn't grow anymore. But basically, so I started there and then went from there to assistant superintendent at Medina Country Club. Before, then I went on to get my master's in turf at A&M after that. So, and then let's see, I worked for Al. I came back then after that and worked for Al at TruGreen when he was there. So
I didn't know that he had been in that.
He was. I'm trying to think of what years that was. Because he was at TruGreen before. I'm trying to think of, was that before? Because that would have been in the 80s, the mid 80s. And so, and I only worked for a few years. I worked out of the Atlanta area for TruGreen. And I got the nickname of Al's Hatchet Gal, which I don't know. Because I was shifting chemicals, because I covered the whole Midwest, of the country. I actually lived when I was working for TruGreen, I actually was living in Wisconsin. And so I'd have to move chemicals. That was right when IPM was starting. And so I would have to, we were tracking routes and making sure that we had chemicals to go just for the one time of the route, when we were looking at different insects, say for bill bugs. So we had routes that had bill bugs from a year before. So I said, okay, get that on yellow freight and get it to this branch now. Cause I had 18 branches that I had to do that. And so,
and the timing is different in every state. So
my gosh. And things, you really had to push it back then. It wasn't quite the way it is today. Sure. And things have improved so much with our tracking and everything. So that was truly on the beginning edge with TruGreen. Because I know we started doing that and then they backed off on it for a while because it was too expensive, and I thought, well, okay.
They backed off on the IPM or
and some of the agronomists too. I actually left TruGreen and went back to grad school.
Okay.
So
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was all done, all that shifting and tracking and monitoring, that was all done before computer modeling and
it
all
was
that stuff.
All done by hand. Yeah.
Crazy.
What a
Wow.
pain in the neck.
Yeah. Hey, well, we could have a whole podcast on that probably, I think. So you're originally from Illinois, correct?
Yes. Yep.
And you recently moved from, I'll tell a funny story here in a minute, but you recently moved from Western Washington
Right.
to Tennessee to be
Right.
closer to some family.
Right.
And before we hit record, you said your parents are both still alive, 98 and 100.
Yeah.
And they're still living in their house, and that's
in the house I grew up in. Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. But but you're closer now, so you don't have to get on a plane to help them out. So that's really cool. So let's talk about your time with Washington State then, because that would be the next step, right?
Yeah, after that was when I finished my PhD, I thought I was headed to North Carolina. That's where I wanted to go. But the only job open back in '89 was Western Washington.
Okay.
And that's the job that fit me the best anyway. So I ended up moving from, the Midwest, from University of Nebraska out to Puyallup, Washington, and I could hardly say it when I
It's not an easy one. My wife cannot get over it, and we've got a daughter-in-law from there, so it's doubly hard.
Well, for the Southerners, I always just say pronounce it pull y'all up.
Yeah.
Like you can get the y'all in there, pull y'all up, and then that's closer than the pile up that they usually say, or whatever it is.
Or pew, or whatever it is. So what kind of research did you do there? Because that wasn't a teaching position, right? Or was it?
Actually, I did teach. My position changed over the 24 years I was there, and my position must have changed 6 or 7 times for the split, because it was originally 75% extension, 25% research, and then it shifted. It was always mainly extension. And then we picked up some teaching and minimized the research. But even if you minimize the research, you're still expected to publish so much, so it kind of became, once you get a 3-way split, it's kind of almost the kiss of death sometimes because of the hours that you have and what you have to do. You really have to balance your time well to keep it going. And it's hard when budgets get bad, especially on the extension side, because a lot of times extension doesn't bring in as much money as the research dollars, and then that goes by the wayside too. So I did a lot of work with athletic fields. I built a whole athletic field at WSU Puyallup, and I picked up research from Dr. Art Antonelli, who's passed away, but he was doing some crane fly work with Dr. Roy Goss, who I replaced, and so I started picking that up, and that's actually how I got into being more of what people called me, the crane fly queen of the Pacific Northwest, working with European crane fly and bill bugs. So I did more insects, and then I did some disease work too, because we needed all of that. Dr. Gary Chastagner, who's still at WSU Puyallup, originally did some turf disease work, but he found, you have to go where the money is, and he found more work with Christmas trees and things like that. So we really didn't have a pathologist. And now, of course, with Oregon State University and Ella Kowaleski and all of his, PhD and postdocs that he has there, they're very well filling in that gap. So that's really good.
Right. So because I don't really know this, and our company president, Joel Simmons, was an extension agent for a while when he got out of school. Who pays for extension?
Well, it comes through the state, and it comes through the federal government too. The ARS, they have a division that extension goes with that. And then your department chair can decide how many funds you get and things like that. So it gets divided up. But
you don't charge the recipients of your expertise for your work, right?
No. Okay. No, because I'm federally funded. So no, I'm not. And that's one of the reasons why, with all the money that goes into marijuana and stuff like that, even though it's legal in the state, because it's a federal law that it's not yet, we still can't deal with that because it would be against our funding. So yeah, it's federally funded. So because it's for the land grant universities, that's how extension got started.
Got it. I'm learning a lot about grants and funding.
Oh my gosh, yes.
As the Soil Conservation District board member
and now. Overhead.
you wonder, I'm only a few months into my term, but you wonder how anything gets done at any level in government when you start looking at all the acronym agencies that you work with.
And the red tape that goes with it. And no, you have to do this step before you do that step. So
yeah. So I don't know, outside of the Northwest, I don't know that anybody really even thinks of cranefly as a turfgrass pest, but it's a big deal out this way, isn't it?
Well, and after I stopped, because I left WSU in 2013. And then after I stopped doing that, they started picking up more crane flies on the East Coast. So it became a great big deal out in New York and all over. I mean, I published several articles. Pat Vidham, who retired, from Massachusetts, University of Massachusetts, she and I got together and helped write the chapter on cranefly, that's in the book that she published. And at that point, it expanded from just the West Coast all the way, and you could see it. The cranefly came in at every port where ships dumped their ballast, because it was in the ballast of the ships. And so you could follow it through Canada, through the Great Lakes, and, and all through there. And actually, down in Houston, I'm trying to think, Mobile was one place. So as I was getting ready to leave WSU, I was seeing more spread of it. And then, after I left WSU, then there was some funding by GCSAA and, so there was some other bigger funding that went to the Northeast and stuff like that to help control it. But pretty much now, when we look at it, the guys, they put it in with their regular program for other pests too.
Sure.
And just controls it, and actually fertilizing, if you're not mowing it too short, you can fertilize right out of it. But the only place they really worried about it, we started seeing it on greens.
Yeah.
After they aerified in December, and that's where we got worried about it. And that's actually how we found the common cranefly as well, because it was used to be just the European, and then we found the common that has two generations. So.
And the European, I mean, it's different timing, but it's similar to the damage of like a black cutworm infestation, right? So.
Oh yeah. Chew around the edge of the holes.
Right. I can remember that from my time in the Midwest, for sure. That was a little more treatable pressure at that point, anyway.
Oh yeah.
And then you did some research that this was always of interest to me, which is why I'm with EarthWorks now. But you did some research on organics, and we didn't always agree on kind of your results. But what were you working on? And from my perspective, I think it's a very difficult thing for researchers to pinpoint, because you have to kind of reduce a lot of your studies to certain things, and it's such a broad topic. What were you researching? I can remember you giving a talk maybe in Jackson Hole or something to one of our associations.
Yeah, well, there were a couple different things, because Eric Miltner was doing most of the work on the organic fertilizer, so I could have been borrowing some of Eric's work, since he's still working with fertility. I did a lot of work with composts.
Right.
Because we were trying to work with those, but basically, the main thing with the organic fertilizers is just that we had to have a time frame, a lapse, because it took about 1.5 to 2 years before that product became available. So we had to fill in with other things, and then it kicked off.
Right.
But so there wasn't really anything. It was just a timing issue. And then especially in Western Washington, with how cold the soil temperatures are, that really affected our data more so than someplace else where you have a longer growing season, the soil temperatures go up quicker. So go to Eastern Washington and, you get much better results. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always say that they've got an advantage on that side, because it doesn't get as cold, but you're right, it doesn't get as warm either. So it's definitely a more temperate situation. Okay, so you said 2013, then you made a move to Walla Walla Community College.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that, and that was kind of to me, it was a surprise, but it was an opportunity to get more in the classroom, right?
Right.
So there are so many people in the industry now that came out of Walla Walla.
Yes.
So talk about that and how it's changed and morphed over time, and
Right. And Walla Walla is just a special program. When they started it, and Bill Griffith is still doing well, since he was the first instructor that they hired part-time, and then went full-time, and then retired, and he was still there to help me, and he's still in Walla Walla and doing well. And see, when he decided to move up into another position, that's when they called me in 2013. They were looking for somebody to take over, and it was in a heartbeat. I mean, I got called like maybe August 15th, and I was there by September,
Right.
it was called Move Fast. And I taught 3 classes every quarter. So that got pretty busy,
Yeah.
teaching 9 classes, and then all over the board too. So I picked up some chemistry and some other things. And Walla Walla's program is special because at the beginning I had students on campus as well, and then and still had online training, and they were doing, before I got there, they had done some DVD training and stuff like that, but then it went all to computer. And then when that picked up, then probably about 4 years into it, a lot of the students just decided, because they knew they could get the classes online because I taught all of them online, they decided to work, and I guess I would too.
Yeah.
Although it is really rough to work a 60-hour work week and go to class. I don't know how the students do it.
I know. And that's, that's what's unique about that program, is it's mostly people already in the industry that are just trying to further their education.
Oh, and the students are just phenomenal. I got to tell you, they're just some top-notch students that can knock it out. I mean, all the students that go to college, if they want to do it, they can.
Yeah.
But, a lot of them have young families and are doing other stuff. I probably cut them a little more slack, because I pretty much made myself available whenever, because I knew that they weren't going to, when they got off work, they probably weren't going to be able to do anything until they did that. So some of the exams were open a little bit longer, because you can't just keep them to a normal work day when they're working 60 hours a week.
So
but go ahead.
So the transition to more, now, are there any students on campus today?
None of the classes that I know of in turf are taught on campus, because they weren't going to pay for that person to teach in the classroom. But I would have done anything. I mean, they've got somebody teaching. My understanding is they've got three different people teaching the different classes. They couldn't find one person to replace what I was doing. They tried, and it didn't work this time. But basically the irrigation classes are taught there's some of those are taught in person. I'm trying to think so there are other classes. If they come to campus, they can take it, but the turf classes would be taught online. And I don't know, because they're teaching, I'm not sure who's teaching the equipment, but they may actually be going over to Veterans Memorial, to do some of the equipment stuff. They could be doing that.
Okay,
because that's what I was trying to do too, was anybody who was on campus, I would take them over there, but if not, I would film it, and then we would show that equipment thing then.
And that push to virtual happened way before COVID. I mean, that was a transition that was happening, well ahead of that. So I mean, obviously, going back to Dr. Turgeon, he pushed World Campus concept before anybody really was utilizing the internet to the extent that we are now. And
I went back and did a sabbatic leave with him, and actually taught it and I actually taught online for WSU, but they decided it wasn't worth it. They didn't think online education was the way to go.
Yeah. How are we doing?
Yeah, I know.
So what, as a traditional on-campus student back in the day, and obviously everything has moved online. I've got a son that's attending Grand Canyon University, finishing up a computer science degree.
Oh, cool.
He may never get on campus. His wife is an advisor for Grand Canyon. She works completely remotely out of Boise, Idaho. So the world's definitely changed. So I can't imagine trying to get the experience that I got online. How do you make up for that in a virtual and online program?
I don't think you make it all up. But what you have to do is say, okay, here is my experience and how I did it. If you want to try to see what's going on, I suggest you go to your boss and tell him, this is what we're doing. This is where we're going. How can you help me see this in person?
Right.
And that's what I had to help I had to really ask for the help of all of the employers and say, look, can you help them? Because basically I'm there teaching the why behind the how that they're doing in person.
Yeah.
So it becomes a real, collaboration between the instructor and the employer. And I know that I struggled with that when, because I was traveling a bit to go see my students, and Bill traveled all over the place. But then after I got there, they decided you can't have the money to travel, even though, I had some money. They didn't want me to use it to travel.
Sure.
And that was the hardest part, is not meeting your students. And so you meet them at a meeting and you go, oh, that's what, you see them online, but it's so different.
Well, you're shorter than I thought, or you're.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, when you talk, Gwen, I thought you were taller than you are,
Yeah.
you sound bigger,
Interesting. Well, but that's a really good point, that the fact that I would assume almost all of your students are in the field, like we talked about.
Yep.
They can then apply it. I remember Melissa Bodine in our office had gotten a master's in the past, and our sales manager just finished his master's up, his MBA from Purdue, and she made the comment at the show this year that, I wish I would have had the opportunity to apply it real time, because it would have been such a great experience, and so I would have learned so much more. So that probably holds true for what your online students were getting out of the program.
Yeah, that's the only advantage that I see, because it's so much harder doing it when you're not on campus, I think.
Yeah.
Because there's never an ideal time, because life gets in the way every place, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and it's so easy to say, I'll get it. I'll get to that test tomorrow. And
oh yeah.
So, in a broader perspective, we're seeing programs shut down. We're seeing fewer and fewer students now, which really kind of baffles me. So I kind of wanted to tap into your understanding and your experience, and I graduated in the very early 90s from turf school, and it was basically a case of, where do you want to go? There was so much opportunity, and I see that exact same scenario today, and yet the enrollment at even the stalwart programs isn't growing by the rate that it should be because of the demand. What are we missing?
I was troubling with that, in my last couple years too. But the interesting thing for me, because at least from, being at Walla Walla, I had 35 students online when I retired. So that's a pretty good size program for
Right.
Walla Walla.
Do you know where it stands today?
I do not. But the whole thing was and I had people calling me all the time wanting people, for jobs. But the thing is the people, they already had jobs and they were in line. Their bosses were thinking of moving them up and stuff.
Sure.
So it filled a niche for them, because they knew they had somebody qualified, and that would stay there, or they would move them up. But then the big hole, like you said, is sending them out to other places. I know that Penn State still has a pretty huge program, for doing that.
Could you see, GCSAA is working hard to
Right.
in their outreach. Programs like the First Green, I think, do nothing but expose us to a new group of potential people coming into the industry. Is that program, and I'm keying on Walla Walla because you were there, but is that program geared towards being able to handle a lot more students potentially?
It would depend on the faculty that they have there to do it. I think, 50 would be where I would see that maybe the breaking point would be for one faculty member. If they split them up, it all depends. I think that it could be done, but that's one thing that for me, by going from teaching in class to online, it was so much work. I mean, I'm wearing glasses now, and I didn't do that when I first went there, but the computer time really weighs on you, and you have to take breaks. And I think that's the main thing. But I think they fill a niche that the other programs don't. And that's why Walla Walla is still going.
Yeah.
Is because it can help with that.
Well, and the point you made, I think, is a good one. I see in my travels a lot more superintendents or facilities, and I'm keying on superintendents, but that program I'll get back to that in a minute, but to me, I see a lot more superintendents identifying existing employees as having the potential to be in the industry and investing in that. And I think that is one thing that maybe needs a little more attention is, gosh, if you have a known commodity on your team and they've got the aptitude and the interest to get into the industry, why aren't more clubs funding at least a portion of that, with the caveat that, hey, you give us 2 years, we'll give you a 2-year degree and
right. And there were some of them that were doing that for
Yeah.
Walla Walla, but I have to give credit to the Northwest Turfgrass Association for funding 2 scholarships and
Right.
the Inland Empire too.
Yeah.
So those people helping to identify and to help fund really help drive the student population as well.
Do you see any of the, I mean, in the past few years, we've had Cal Poly closed down. Lake City's been gone forever in Florida.
Yeah, and Kentucky went.
You ever see that coming back?
I'm not sure. I think the consolidation, I think we hit our heyday with so many of them. And I think it's going to be an integrated, especially with the so much of the internet. I see programs working together in tri-state programs and things like that, kind of like what we did in the Northwest before.
Right.
But I think you see that more between the universities now, rather than having one program. Maybe you've got an entomologist from one university working with another. So I think the internet will help cover those gaps. And I think it's not ideal in some cases, but it may be the most economical.
So are there examples of that right now that I don't know about? I know there's that Great Lakes program.
Right.
Are there others?
I don't know. Well, if you look on I'm trying to think of because we've got a lot of large research grants. If you look at that one, why can't, the one through Minnesota on the cold. Yeah. Look at how many people are that's an international program.
Sure.
So you've got everybody working together on that for, snow mold and everything like that. And then I'm just trying to think for some of the others, because I know at one point, I know University of Tennessee had contacted me while I was still at Walla Walla, talking about getting together. I'm trying to think of how many schools were in it, but just looking at how we can recruit more students. So there was actually a grant trying to look at that. And I don't think it went anywhere. I got permission to be part of it, but it didn't fly forward at that point. But I think that's what's going to is going to happen is it will just be, looking at collaborating in a different way. We won't have individual state programs probably.
So if I were an employer that had an employee that was interested in getting into the field, where would you send them? Where would you direct them?
I guess to me, it would depend on where they were located in the United States, because
What does it?
Pardon me?
What does it depend? Based on what you just said?
Doesn't. I guess it depends on whether the student wants a physical experience or not, or if they want to just, and where they're working.
Sure.
Okay, because
they want to work.
Yeah, where they want to work, and I'll tell you one thing, Kevin, too, that we didn't mention is a lot of the students that were coming to me already had a 4-year degree as well.
Yeah.
Like in a lot of them were criminal justice and other programs. So a lot of their other coursework was out of the way, and all they had to take was the turf work.
Sure.
So that made it quicker.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I totally skipped that part of it, but I guess as you think of it, no, it doesn't matter. I guess, when I did it, everything was relational. Oh, well, you should go here because this is where you can get this kind of information. Yeah. So depending on if they had a specialty they wanted to learn about, I would point them towards a professor that might be able to help them. Or if there was a grant, I guess that'd be more for a graduate student. If they were just looking to get training, I guess it would depend on, do they have a scholarship? Can they earn a scholarship? Because some of the online programs like Walla Walla, since it's through a community college, is a little less expensive than, Penn State, where you've got a broader background of people and more support. So it costs a little bit more there too, as well. So, and Oregon State is teaching online program too. I know they've started in with that and certificates, and there are multiple. Rutgers has a 2-year program and certificates. So it all depends on what the person really wants out of it. If they want to keep moving up.
Yeah.
Um,
That certificate program, I was just exposed to that this last fall, that certificate program at Oregon State.
Mhm.
It seems like a pretty good gateway for somebody that may be interested, but they're not quite sure. And you can get just kind of individual certificates for IPM or for, kind of a general turf grass. But it all, correct me if I'm wrong, it all feeds into the 2 and the 4-year program, right?
Well, I would assume it would. Sometimes they don't, but
Okay.
I don't know. It depends on how it's within the system. I'm sure that they have looked at that, because it really wouldn't be to your advantage if it
Correct.
didn't fall into the system, because that was one of the things that we had trouble with transferring students to Oregon State, because they wouldn't take Walla Walla's turf courses. And that's the choice of the administration. That wasn't Alex. He had
Yeah.
nothing. Alex
Right.
had no power over that.
Yeah. And he would
So,
have nothing to gain, or nothing but gain out of accepting it. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, to keep them. And so we tried to do that to take them over there. But if they want to go the 4-year route, they have to decide early on to take those higher level background courses so they can get into a 4-year program.
Yeah.
So that does make a difference. But for, like you said, for a lot of these people who are, mid-change in career, they, decided they didn't want to do this and just started working on a golf course and decided, whoa, this is what I
could do this
need.
for a living.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's how we got a lot of the students, was
Yeah.
because they could get their turf experience and then move on in 2 years. So it helped them a lot.
And that's where the outlet of a 2-year program, I think, makes a ton of sense, where you don't need to take, English literature, but you really have to get down to the nitty gritty and learn learn what's going to move you up the ladder a little bit quicker.
That's right.
The other interesting thing about Walla Walla that I don't know is still around is, for a good number of years, there was an equipment manager's certificate, and that's gone, right? And I was blown away at the organization of that program, and it was kind of a sad thing to see. It just kind of died on the vine, unfortunately.
It was amazing. I don't really understand all of that. And I know when you look at, I guess I was looking at some of that, like comparing it to the HVAC program at Walla Walla, that the students could actually earn more out on the job than they could staying in school. So they would just go out. And I'm
Yeah.
not so sure that might not have been what happened with that as well, as that there was
Right.
such a demand that they just went out.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
Because that kind of, I think it was already heading that way before I came to Walla Walla. So I was just, because George was teaching that program, and I don't know, I guess there just weren't as many students. Well, when the students weren't coming to campus and they were being online, it takes a lot of teaching. An online equipment course is a lot of work.
Boy,
'Cause
I can't even imagine.
No,
That's
no,
one I would think you would have to have your hands on a wrench and on a grinder and so forth.
well, you had to depend on them, going out to the shop and checking a checklist and
Yeah.
doing that, because there's no way I could do that.
Right.
I can sit the students, that I had there on a mower out at, Veterans Memorial, and go through it with them. But for the people, online, I'm kind of left going, okay, I got to depend on your boss to help you with this.
Yeah. The program, and I'm dwelling a lot on Walla Walla, but I think it's
It's an important program.
and it's produced so many quality people.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But I'm amazed at how many people I run across on the sports turf side that have
Oh, yeah.
come into that program. And it's a more even balance than I would have ever expected. Is there a focus on that? Is that it just happens to be the way it is?
No, I think when we go through, we cover examples for golf course and from athletic fields. I mean, I know I had one student go out and work at for Kevin White, who's now going to be managing the new athletic facility that the Sounders are building. So I'm hoping that one of my former students is going to come back and work for him, because he went with family back in Walla Walla and was out of the industry, and they're really, he's so talented.
Oh, is that Renee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Good
wasn't going to
guy.
mention him by name, but since we're
That's
in a
okay. I
podcast,
know him well, and he's a good
oh,
guy, and I know
I
Kevin
love
speaks
Renee.
very highly of him.
He's done so well.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of Renee.
And Kevin and I got to know each other pretty well when my son was playing baseball at University of
Oh yeah.
Portland, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
and I've had him on the podcast as well because I think he's one of the brightest guys in the
Oh my gosh.
on the sports turf side for sure.
I think so much of Kevin. That's for the people that I work with in the Northwest. I missed that a lot. That was very difficult to give up, and I'm hoping to get back. And but this was a family decision to come here.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean I'm getting out. I mean, I was texting with John Sorokin at University of Tennessee this morning, and I'm hoping to get over there in the next couple of weeks. I know they just hired Becky Bowling as a new turf extension person, and so she's there. And so if I can help with mentoring of students, because I'm only 2 hours out of Knoxville, and they have a research station that's just an hour from me. So however I could help, with mentoring of students or doing some small research projects, I'd love to keep my foot in the door, so to speak. So
well, I'm sure I speak for most of us out here that you're always welcome back in the Northwest.
no, I'd be happy to come visit.
Yeah. All right. So I don't know, since you haven't been in your new home very long, I don't know if you've unpacked your crystal ball, but it's time to get that out. Let's talk about. We've talked about equipment managers, and I think there's going to be a big deficit of that talent in the future. Certainly assistants. Maybe we won't even get into just people to fill the roles on the staff. But where do you see superintendents finding talent right now? We'll just categorize it as talent from your perspective, because you've got a very unique perspective in research and but also in teaching. Where are we not looking? What bush have we not beat to find find talent?
That's a real interesting fact. I remember, I keep thinking about that because I remember when I was in grad school, when we had people coming into turf, and they're coming from other fields. And they said, well, they've got this background. He said, I can always teach them turf, but I can't teach them that specialty that they have that will help the turf.
Mm-hmm.
So, some of these computer geeks, like your son and things like that, I see there's a pool, because we're continually going more and more to using all that technology. We can teach them the turf and bring them in for some of these things to help too. So, and I know we've done some of that, and but I've been scratching my head too, trying to think of where haven't we looked, because I know when I was back in living in Sumner before I moved down here, because I'd moved from Walla Walla back to the west side, and I worked for a nursery, landscape nursery for 6 months or so, and that's hard work.
Did you tell them you had a PhD, or did you just walk
I
in
knew
and
them.
say,
I
"Hi,
worked
I'm
with
Gwen"?
them. No, I knew them. And they used me for turf problems too. And they said, Gwen needs seed over here, but you come to plant selection, because when I went to school, I actually had my first degree was in ornamental horticulture, and I almost went to Dow Gardens in Midland, Michigan. But because I got the job at Medina Country Club, that's why I focused on turf, because that's what made the decision between plants and grass.
Interesting.
And so, but I watched him, and he goes down to the farmer's market and pulls people out of the farmer's market to come work at the nursery. So, he would go and he'd talk to people and doing, so he's just recruiting any place he can, and I thought, oh, that's creative, and he became lucky on some of it, but, you still have that dropout rate, just like, if we're advertising and you get 5 people to say they're going to come and only 2 even show up.
Yeah, and it's it's tougher where I am with seasonal work and things like that, just to be able to keep people coming back every year. And some I think it becomes a cultural thing where you got to create a culture that people want to come back to, and it's not all. It can never be about money, because it's not. You're not going to get rich, and at least working on the crew. But yeah, I've seen a lot of success stories, and a lot of guys still scratching their heads as to where they're going to find people to fill the seats on the mowers.
Well, and the whole work-life balance has shifted since I came into the industry, because you were just expected
Put
you
your
know,
head down and get to work, right?
that's right. And it doesn't matter how long it takes, your family will be there when you get home and stuff. And there needs to be a better work-life balance for this. Yes, I can do it, but you're going to have to, I need to leave at this point. So somebody's going to have to take over, so, we did that. I mean, because plants don't wait. That's
Yeah.
our thing.
You know what? And I think you'll agree with this. Man, it was a hard hurdle for me to get over with the generational shift
Yep.
because I learned from probably the same type of people that you learned from is
Yep.
just, you put in the time and you do that and you,
Yep.
and you pay your dues. But I've actually got a lot of optimism about the folks coming into the industry now, because you're right, the grass doesn't wait, but
They
there
have
have
to have a balance.
they have to have and they get that. And I think that's now, how do they accomplish what needs to be accomplished with that balance? That's something I'm fascinated to see how they develop new programs and new habits, I guess, to get there.
Yeah, and some of that from a university perspective, it's what the university will back and sponsor you for. So it's just like
Right.
when I could only do certain things because the university wouldn't allow me to do these things. So I would have to, the stuff where I would go out and do some things, I'd have to do it on my own time, and then do the stuff that would pay money, for
Yeah.
grants. Make
Yeah.
sure to put that in there too, because they would get, I mean, and that's just the way you have to do it. Some things you have to say no, or bring somebody else in, say, I think this person would help me. So the networking, I think, is how we're going to keep continuing to get it done, and keep opening doors. We can't afford to be as narrow-minded as we were maybe before.
Well, I was thinking about what you said early on in the conversation, that you were hired as an assistant superintendent at Medina. Without dating either one of us, I've got to assume that was probably early 80s, maybe somewhere in there.
78.
Okay.
78.
But I guess my point was going to be that was a trail that had not been blazed.
No, and it was tread very lightly in some cases, because I was there at Old Elm, which has never had a female in there, and we had a meeting there, and my boss said they, very nicely just said, well, they would prefer, you can't come play golf, and I said, well, you got me working anyway. You're going. I got to work, But he says, but you can come. They had the meeting at the Italian restaurant across the street because I couldn't go on the facility.
Isn't that interesting?
And there was once I remember going out to Aurora Country Club, and it was the first one of the first meetings I had gone to out there. I was 22 years old, and
Right.
I go into Aurora Country Club, and I remember Carl Hopan was there, and my boss was of course he was across the bar and grill at the far corner. And so I'm kind of waving at him. I start walking in, and the guy in the white coat stops me. He says, "You can't go in here, young lady." And I went, "Oh, well, my boss is over there. Would you tell him I'm here?" Of course, he didn't hear that part. So he goes over to the table at the very far corner, and everybody starts laughing. And I thought, oh God, I'm just dying, and my boss coming over, and John Jackman, he's a Purdue graduate, so very quiet, meek, mannered, and he comes over and he says, "Hey, what are you doing out here?" And I said, "Well, this nice gentleman, said I had to stay out here." And I said, "Look, if there's a problem, the hors d'oeuvres were in the room right next to me." I said, "I'll go eat hors d'oeuvres. I don't need to come in the bar. I can go in and go start eating over here." I was go get the food. And he says, "Nah." He says, "This is a business meeting. Get your butt in here." So I followed him in, and heads turned.
I'll bet.
And I was just about a shade of scarlet, because and so I just went over to the table, and John goes to all the guys. He says, "Well, obviously, gentlemen, this is not my wife." Because the guy had said, "Your wife's here looking for you." And I went, oh, I just sunk through the table. But, but I never thought about that, and the fact that at Medina, when I go out to the championship course, the monster, and, the women are not members of the club. They were guests of their husbands,
Right.
and that fact did not even hit me until I started working there, that they're
Sure.
only guests. But it didn't affect my job. And I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
It was funny because my dad said later in the years, he says, "I was always worried about you because you're so little, and you didn't think about what you were doing, and there were no other women doing it." And I said, "But it was what I wanted to do."
Yeah.
I didn't think about anything else, and I just didn't notice I was different. So,
I've always thought that that's a potential pipeline that we just haven't tapped into. My wife is in this situation. Our youngest is about to graduate high
uh-huh.
school, and she's thinking, well, what am I going to do with myself now that I'm not raising kids? But so why should, there's been a lot of press and a lot of push for the concept of women in turf, and some will say that it's overcooked, some will say it's long overdue. Why should somebody in turf management care about this campaign? I mean, I have my own. I've had a number of female interns and assistants, and and employees, and to a person, they've all worked harder. And side note, they've all been easier on equipment than any of the guys
Oh
that
yeah.
have ever worked for me. So, I think it's a huge opportunity, but what are the hurdles still for women thinking about getting into the industry? Is it
Well,
still the same?
there are some the same. There's some that have maybe been lifted because it's far more acceptable now
Yeah.
than before. But if you just didn't look at it, that was okay. But there are still things, there are still guidelines, especially, in some of the good old boy areas of things as far as, and that goes with universities and everything else. But I guess the main thing is to know just that they can do it. It's the support network, I
Yeah.
think, that you're not out there alone,
Right.
because I don't want to support the women, as opposed to the men. It's just, it's not as much of a novelty as it used to be, but I like them, going out there and supporting themselves and having the camaraderie,
Yeah.
especially around the tournaments. That's the main thing, is you're not there alone, and then you've got somebody else you can
Right.
talk to, and you've got friends all over the country, which what the men have been doing for years. So we're just playing catch up,
Yeah.
really, is what
My
I see.
my good friend Troy Flanagan at the
Yeah.
Olympic Club.
Yeah.
And were you at that event?
I could not go. No.
He I wouldn't say he took a risk, but that was a bold move on his part, and it paid off in spades. In fact, I was out there a couple of weeks ago visiting him and the construction project, and he may or may not have picked up a really good assistant through
Cool.
that opportunity, and from New York State. And she's really got her stuff together and is going to do very well as a result of that. I think the network, like you said, and the
To know the
camaraderie.
possibilities, because
Yeah.
I didn't even know it was there. I mean, I raked bunkers at Urbana Country Club coming through University of Illinois.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I got told I should be in the clubhouse making coffee, but
Yeah.
that, who cares, but that was the thing, is I didn't know that was a possibility until I fell into
Sure.
it.
I wonder if it
So,
was different in the Midwest, because the club I grew up working at in Minnesota was there were always a half a dozen women on the crew, whether they were high school or college students, and maybe it was just something that wasn't really, they didn't care about it at that point. But
yeah, I had one female intern from Michigan State while I was assistant at Medina. And I've probably had two or three go through Walla Walla.
that's it.
Yeah, there haven't been as many. Most of the ones coming in, that already have a degree were male. And I've had some, I'm just looking at the demographics of it.
Yeah.
Some more Hispanics coming in Walla
Right.
Walla as well, which is very,
Huge opportunity, I think, for that part
absolutely.
of the industry.
So I think, for the women in turf, again, it's the camaraderie and letting them know that it's a possibility so that we expand. And that's another way to get more talented people in the industry. But, I'm not saying that the females are better than the males. I'm just saying we're
There's
trying to
opportunity.
advertise it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the cool thing about that organization is that you've got industry folks, and you've got professors and people like yourself. You've got equipment managers now. You've got assistants. I mean, it's such a great cross section of the industry that it really does. If it's somebody's first time attending, it I would assume it opens their eyes to the opportunity. Wow, I could do that too, and it's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Yeah. Because you think about it, when, Leah Brillman, who I know you're going to talk to as well, she and
Yeah.
I were two of there are probably about 5 or 6 of us in that same age group. And there used to be
Yep.
just that group that we would meet with C5 from the agronomy division, and then we bring in graduate students and stuff. And that started probably 25 years ago.
Sure.
And now with GCSAA, it's just expanded. So that's the advantage, is it's expanded so that everybody gets to know each other. And I think that's the good thing.
Yeah, it's quite a little, I can't say fraternity, can I? Can I say fraternity?
You can.
It's a sorority.
Sorority?
Of people in the industry. I'm going to get in all kinds of trouble.
Well, we're probably both going to get in trouble. What the heck?
Okay, so I'm looking at the clock, and as usual, this has been a lot quicker. But I don't know if you've ever listened to my podcasts, but
I have not.
I have what I call the lightning round at the end. And I don't ever prepare, so just whatever pops into your head with each of these questions.
Oh my gosh!
And this is pretty custom tailored for you, so I think this will be interesting. So the first question I have is, because I know in your job roles and career, you've been to some pretty interesting corners of the world. What's the coolest place you've ever visited, whether it's for work or not?
Well, I think the coolest place obviously would be the South Island in New Zealand, because I did a sabbatic leave there for 3 months, and then I went back and did the Milford Trek, and I think that was my favorite thing, was doing the Milford Trek, because there was a lot that reminded me of Western Washington, but boy, going to the glowworm caves and some of the other things that you just can't see is just amazing. And it's not done yet, because I just got off the International Turf Board of Directors. And I think I'm going to be helping with the pre-conference tour in Japan in 25. So I'm going to be going to Japan, which I've never been to before. So that'll be kind of cool.
So with all of this that you're still involved with, I think of the term rhino, but you're retired in name only, right? I mean, I'm
still helping people. I will probably never retire. I had somebody call me about weed control in Western Washington yesterday, and I just, away you go.
Well, it's what keeps you fresh and keeps you going.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so you're probably going to alienate some friends here, but what's your favorite turfgrass species? I have never asked that question before.
Oh gosh, I don't know. Having moved right back to the South, it's gonna change now, because when I came to Western Washington, I was high on tall fescues, and and those have improved, and I've got a tall fescue lawn too. I really like the fine fescues.
Okay.
They're
where you are, or just in general?
In general, and I'll have to say, in some cases, I like the texture of them, the way they look. They perform in shade. Of course, they don't like really wet feet, but and I'm in red clay here,
Right.
so it's
wet feet country.
What?
Wet feet country.
Oh yeah, it was compacted and they put it down, and it's just, oh my goodness. But I don't know. That's a hard one, Kevin.
Yeah, that's why I asked it.
Because I know you did. Because I can alienate them well and say that I like annual bluegrass too. I mean, after living in the Northwest for 34 years, how could you not?
I actually thought that was going to be your go-to answer.
Well, it's a secondary. It's here. I've seen it. And
somebody recently said, just the most obvious and yet profound statement. Boy, Poe is great till it isn't.
Yeah.
And that kind of sums up. Okay, so all of the above was your answer. I like that.
And then I could shift to moss too.
Yeah. No, that's not a turf species. This will be another interesting one. Most important innovation in the turfgrass industry in your career. That's a couple of years, so you're going to have to think a little bit on that one. Do I need to have the Jeopardy final?
Yeah, you probably do. But I was just going to say that the continued, because Dr. Goss really started with the sand and Vic Youngner, down in California. But the increasing use of sand and organic matter together.
Okay.
Whereas, they used to just go straight sand because it was too expensive. But And that, because we did that whole trial for the USGA with mixing it in, and yeah, and now looking at what they're doing with aerification,
Right.
Necessary, not necessary,
Yeah.
and oh boy, that's going to make a huge difference.
Okay. That's a good that's a good researcher's answer.
Yep.
I usually get the answers go right to some piece of equipment, whether it's GPS or aerification tools or what have you. But
We
that's a
still
good
got
answer.
tools. We still got tools we haven't found. It's just like, finding the
Yeah.
mower out of the carpet industry. We just got to look at the right people to bring it in to use, because that stuff is already out there. We just got to figure out how to use it.
Right. No, you're exactly right. And that's where a lot of the innovation comes from. Hey,
Yep.
I could use that for this. And
Well, you did a lot of that. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So this one's a little bit lighter. Beer, wine, or other.
All the above.
Okay. All right.
Well, let's put it this way. I probably drink more wine.
Yeah.
I've switched to other. Jameson is my go-to because I have an allergy to yeast. So I can get away with drinking the hard stuff because it's filtered.
What happens with the allergy? Boy, we're going to get on a rabbit trail here.
I just get a little bit, the stomach
Tired?
goes wonky, and I first noticed it because I didn't drink till I went to college, University of Illinois, and
Sure,
I'd go drink beer and I'd fall asleep, right?
Yeah.
So wheat, rye, barley malt, came up. So then I couldn't have that. And so then I switched to wine, which is not a good story because when everybody else is chugging beer, chugging wine is not a good idea. Subject went wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. Last one.
Uh-oh.
Now that you're retired, this is a retirement question.
Oh,
Bucket
gosh.
list item or trip that you want to do in the next whatever years.
Oh, I've got a lot. When I went over to Italy, I didn't make it to Rome or Cinque Terre and stuff like that. So I would like to get over there, but I am looking forward to the trip to Japan.
Okay.
And right before COVID hit, I was scheduled to do, a railroad trip through Denali. We had it all booked and everything, and in the gold cars up above and everything, and had to cancel it. So I'm going to get that done too. Good. I meant to do it while I was in the Northwest and I didn't get it done. I did do the trip up through Alaska. I actually did that with Dr. Beard and his wife.
Oh, cool.
And that was probably one of my favorite trips, was going to Alaska with them on a cruise. So that we went with the Princess Cruises, and it was really nice.
Well, don't wait too long. Get it all
I'm not
done.
going to.
That's awesome. Good for you.
And you got to come to Grand Ole Opry down here.
I'd like to. Yeah, that sounds like.
Okay, I'm getting my Murphy bed set up in a couple of weeks, so I'll have a spare bedroom.
Sounds good. Well, we have come up on an hour as I expected. It went super smooth. So, Gwen, I really appreciate you being on, and your insights and your dedication in the industry are appreciated by so many. And I speak for a lot of people. I wish you the best in your retirement. We know you're not gone.
I'm around.
You're just taking a break is all.
Yep.
So
Well, I appreciate you too.
Yeah, no, it's been really fun, and I'll give you the link when this comes on. But thanks for joining us, and thanks everybody for listening. Hope you got something out of it. And we solved a lot of the problems with creating a pipeline for employees. So go out there and get them now. I don't think we solved anything. But anyway, thanks, Gwen.
Way to go, Kevin. Thank you.
Jumping on, and glad your refrigerator or your freezer is fixed. And we'll talk to you soon. Stick around for a minute, and I'll talk to you offline.
Okay, thanks.